Maxitek, Vadi Buluşmaları'nı sunar.
Merhaba, ben Oğuzhan Aygören. Vadi Buluşmaları'nda bu hafta çok özel bir konukla beraberiz. Kaliforniya Üniversitesi Berkeley'nin vizyoner lideri Profesör Rich Lyons. Rich, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor for me as well.
Thank you so much. Rich Lyons, he is an economist. He is the former dean of the Haas Business School at UC Berkeley, former chief innovation entrepreneurship officer at UC Berkeley, and now the chancellor. Actually, he is the visionary leader who transformed the university into an innovation engine to become number one in terms of the venture-backed startups, number one in terms of the female founders, number one in terms of the Nobel laureates. Actually, Berkeley has always been proud about that, about the number of Nobel laureates, I guess. And now turning all this science into innovation and entrepreneurship, and recently came with that book called Startup Campus, actually telling that how Berkeley turned into a startup campus and how organizations in other places, other countries, governments can learn from this playbook, this blueprint. So I'm so excited to talk about all this with Rich here. It's a great honor. And Rich, I would like to start with this question. I mean, you have been at Berkeley for a very long time, yes, as a student, as a professor, yes, now at the top as the chancellor. And I also feel like that Berkeley is a very special place. So I would like to start with that. Mm-hmm. So what makes Berkeley so special and unique? Let's start with that.
Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity here. And also you mentioned that it made it almost sound like I single-handedly created all this innovation and entrepreneurship, which I did not. I know we will talk about this, but it is very much a team sport, the way this has happened at Berkeley, right? So what makes Berkeley special? Well, there are a lot of things that make Berkeley special, but there are a few things that at least stick out to me. As you mentioned, I was an undergraduate here. It completely transformed my view of the world. I wasn't planning on becoming an academic, and it got me very excited about ideas. But I think if I had to distill it to one thing, Berkeley is the kind of place that grabs you by the coat or the shirt, and it shakes you and it says, you have more degrees of freedom to live your life than you realize. Now go use them. I've always loved that about Berkeley. It's a very liberating place. It's sort of like, go for it. So in entrepreneurship, as an example, for a lot of people, they think they do that, other people do that. We are trying to cause to happen the cognitive shift from they do that to I do that. And Berkeley's the perfect place to do that.
That's amazing. So, I mean, in that DNA, this entrepreneurship culture, so you can do that culture is inherent.
I think that part of the culture really is inherent. You know, this idea that I can be, I have agency over my life, I can be what I want to be. There's another part of the culture that is even more specific, that is exactly as you described. Sometimes we use the phrase question the status quo.
Yeah.
The idea that there's got to be a better way to do this. So there are a lot of really smart people who don't naturally think there's got to be a better way to do this. That isn't just, are you smart? That's the way you think. Yeah. So Berkeley attracts a lot of people who are very sharp and have this mindset of there's got to be a better way to do this. And I think that's part of what's the cultural engine behind what Berkeley has become.
That's great. And actually, in many universities all around the world, actually it's like that. I mean, the universities, it is seen like university's job is like research, teaching. And when we think about entrepreneurship innovation, it's not at the top. Maybe in recent years, we see a lot. I mean, in Turkey, while I was working at Boğaziçi University, I started an entrepreneurship center, did a lot of that. But there was always this challenge that a university's job is not maybe commercializing all that or helping capitalism in all of that. So I think that's the reason why you put an unexpected place to become number one in entrepreneurship. But at the end, it turned out that Berkeley defines itself as a startup campus. So I would like to ask, how do you overcome these challenges and what other organizations and institutions can learn from that so they can create their own startup campus?
Well, there's a lot in that question, and it's a really important question. But let me start with this idea of is this something that we're a public university, a great public research university should be doing? There's a wonderful video, if people haven't seen it, by Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, called Start With Why. And so let's start with the mission, because I think that's a good way to say it. Is this mission advancing for Berkeley, or is this out on the sideline of our mission and maybe not something we should be doing? That's a really fundamental question, a legitimate question, right? And when you talked about research and teaching, and we also talk about public service, right, as sort of the three mission elements. I'm going to use the word mission elements, because in fact, if you look at the mission of the University of California, the deep why is the phrase creating long-term societal benefit. And the very important hows are research, teaching, and public service. Right? So creating long-term societal benefit through excellent research, teaching, and public service. So when you look at it that way, that the innovation and entrepreneurship is really driving a lot of long-term societal benefit, right? If you only say, no, the deep why is research, teaching, and public service, and maybe we can shoehorn innovation and entrepreneurship into some kind of public service category, sort of like, I think that's missing what the mission is really about.
Well, I think that's a great definition that many institutions around the world should look at that way. Looking at the why, and at this why, at the core of this mission is actually using research and teaching for the societal impact. So at the end of the day, academics exist to create impact. And in order to do that, actually, you also mentioned about one of the fundamentals, and you call it the values, the culture. So that's something very unique to actually what you have been doing. When you were a dean at Haas Business School, you came up with this culture.
Yes.
Question the status quo was one of it.
Yes.
And also when I'm talking to your team and when I was reading the book, I felt a lot like in order to become number one in innovation entrepreneurship, it's doing this is one thing, but the other thing is doing this by sticking to the values. Mm-hmm. So what would you like to say about this culture and values?
Well, I'm almost obsessed with how leaders shape and manage values, I think, or culture. But often when we use the word culture, you could think of a culture as shared behavioral norms, but ultimately shared behavioral norms come from shared values and so forth. So you mentioned question the status quo, which is very naturally supportive of a startup campus and this ecosystem. When we wrote that down, we were, this is important in terms of change management, because lots of culture efforts fail. They don't work very well. We've all seen, not effective culture efforts. So what we talked about was codifying the culture. So when we said question the status quo, we weren't saying we're creating a culture, we should all go this way because maybe this will happen, right? Instead, it was more like, look, question the status quo. We're just putting words to what we've always been. Nobody at Berkeley, for those of your audience that know Berkeley, nobody heard question the status quo and thought, where'd you come up with that? It's sort of like, yeah, that's a codification. But once you codify it and name it, and then you use the same phrase again and again and again, now everybody uses it. Now it becomes part of like a tagline, but a meaningful tagline for the university. And there are other cultural elements that have that same sort of feature. And I think we've tried to think about. I'll give you another example. Okay, a concrete example. When we think about behavioral norms, one of the ones that we're still working on is like, how about a yes if culture? Yes if. Okay? So put your if conditions. Oh, I'm concerned about this. We already tried that. We don't have the money, whatever it is, right? What are the concerns? Put those on the table. And then if somebody says, well, there are 5 if conditions or 5, opponent ideas, we'd better move on. It's sort of like, no. We're going to bring our creativity to eliminate or mitigate those if conditions. But the default is yes. The default is no. And so let me give you a concrete example. Just in a meeting, literally last week, somebody said, oh my gosh, I was just in a meeting. We had this neat idea on the table. We were talking about the idea, and then somebody said, but we don't have the money. And it just killed the conversation. Sort of like, entrepreneurs don't have the money either, right? The idea that should kill a conversation is not right. Could we run a pilot at 10% of the expense that we were thinking about? What could we do? Could we fundraise for it? But it's sort of like, the default needs to be yes. Now, it doesn't mean we will never land at no, but it does completely change people's sense for maybe there's a solution here.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it out. I mean, I really love this idea of creativity. And actually, I mean, what I believe is, and this is something that I teach as well, I believe like innovation is the result, creativity is the start.
Yeah.
We need to start with that. Because at the end of it, if you want innovation, so we need to have room for this uncertainty and come up with ways.
Yes.
And in that sense, I also suggest that like instead of saying yes, but,
Yes.
we can say yes and.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I think yes and is a lovely phrase, and I think, but let's. I think yes and is better than yes but. But yes and in my mind is actually about you and I having a discussion, making room for each other's ideas, and listening a little bit more actively. Yes if is about action. It's about we're going to do this. We're going to talk about it. We're going to figure out a solution, and then we're going to do it. So that's why I think yes if is a lot more powerful than yes and, as much as I like yes and.
Yeah, that's true. Then actually, I'd like to move it towards your definition of innovation.
Yes.
So you told it's about action.
Yes.
So how you come from this invention? Like, I mean, in Berkeley, we mentioned that just last week, Berkeley got 2 new Nobel laureates. Yes. Now the most number of Nobel laureates on campus. There is great science going on, and how do we define innovation coming from this science to the action to the result?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's really important that we have operating definitions that make sense. So I have a simple operating definition that I've always used for innovation. It is new ideas put into practice. It's both of those pieces. So when you think about invention or discovery or Nobel Prize winning research, that is clearly new ideas, but it's not put into practice yet. Right? So what they win Nobel Prizes for is not innovation, because it hasn't yet been put into practice. And it is doing both of those things. They're both big categories, right? But you need both for it to be innovation. And that's an important distinction. So how do we get this stuff into the world, right? How do we improve the world and people's lives based on all this new thinking that's happening? And I think, great universities need to do both of those things. And so just to be clear then, so entrepreneurship is a specific way put new ideas into practice.
Great.
That's another way to think about it. So those are two distinct, they're related, but they're distinct concepts.
Okay, then I would like to go a little deeper in that question about this action part. So entrepreneurship is just one way of putting invention into practice. Yes. As innovation. So far, I mean, in your role, I mean, as the former chief officer, innovation entrepreneurship officer, and now as the chancellor, what do you think as the key milestones in the last 10, 15, 20 years that you have been doing all this?
Here at Berkeley?
Yes. Here
at Berkeley. Well, I mean, it's a lovely question. I think, so one of the things that we've talked about, if you go back 25 years or so or further back, there was a lot of reluctance at Berkeley among our faculty especially. It's like, this feels too commercial, right? It's kind of like where you started with your earlier question. It's sort of like, we do research and teaching. I mean, why are we doing this, right? And I think so for a lot of people and a lot of faculty, how do we shift that culture? So I'll give you 2 examples. Here's one example. If you ask me, what's the single thing that happened over the last 20 years that most shifted faculty culture in the direction of being receptive to entrepreneurship? Okay, that's a legitimate question. Yeah. And here's my best answer. There are lots of things you could point to, right? There are hundreds of things that have happened. Here, I think, is the most important one. About 12, 13 years ago, and this was catalyzed by philanthropy, by a donor, we got a large gift that created something called the Baker, B-A-K-A-R, the Baker Fellows Program. And the Baker Fellows Program was research funding, substantial research funding, but it had to be for research that was ready to go into commercialization. So it was really translational research or commercialization research funding. And so we gave, you could say, well, we just got a gift and then we're going to put something on a website. You can apply for it, and like nobody talks about it. It's like, that's not the way this happened. The sponsor of this program was our provost, the chief academic officer of the whole university, himself somebody who had started companies. And the message that we now have funding for this kind of work, and it is appropriate for Berkeley to be doing it, and you should apply, that cultural shift message. And if you say, yeah, but it's 7 grants per year, 8 grants per year, but now we're getting 40, 45 faculty applying for these grants every year. So if you actually look over the last 10 years, what percentage of our faculty in STEM, science, technology, math, and engineering, have applied for one of these Baker Fellows grants. It's a really high percentage. So in other words, it legitimizes this idea of research toward commercialization. The last thing I would mention here is, because this is important for our faculty, if somebody said, yeah, but you're pulling your best faculty away from the fundamental research that is the root source of Berkeley's preeminence. I mean, that has a cost. Recognize the cost. And I would actually say, okay, in the jargon of my field, I'm an economist. If somebody said, are fundamental research and translational research, are they complements or are they substitutes? I think they are fundamentally complements. They go together. Yes. The fact that we are better at this is bringing new funding in for our fundamental research. And if somebody says, yeah, you just gave a grant to one of your best faculty members to create a bunch of companies. Well, guess who's doing most of that work? Graduate students, postdocs, right? So there's a division of labor there. The idea that Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize for her work on CRISPR and gene editing and so forth, a bunch of companies have come out of that. But she's still doing fundamental research. And she's attracting more money for her fundamental research because 10 companies have come out of that fundamental research.
Actually, just last month, I also read an article in Forbes. Jan Stoica was
another
in the cover.
example, another perfect example.
Yeah, he has 3 unicorn startups.
Right.
And the title was like, "Why I still teach at Berkeley."
Yeah, and I don't have any. I mean, no, he's absolutely terrific. But part of it, that article was he wants to be at Berkeley, right? So I think some people say if you create too many incentives in that direction, your faculty are just going to leave. But these great faculty, they want to work with graduate students. They want to work with postdocs. They like teaching. The university environment is not replicable in the private sector. It really isn't.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I love being at the university. I mean, also as a personal story of mine, I was like, actually, I got an offer to be a co-founder in a startup while I'm doing PhD. So I had to make a decision, either going to the startup. I knew I was gonna make millions out of that, but I intentionally actually chose to stay in academia because this is what I love, and I said, okay, I can make money anyways. Exactly. I'll find a way. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so exciting in that sense to be in this environment. And as we say, okay, then we can move the conversation towards the role between the corporations and the university.
Yes.
So now at the institute, now I'm a director at the Institute for Business Innovation. Yes. You were one time as a faculty director there. And when I talk to many corporates, like corporates from Turkey or from other places, they ask me questions like, okay, what do you offer? So what does Berkeley offer to corporates? So how can corporates work with Berkeley? So, okay, I give my answer, but here having you asking this question and maybe listening to your answer would be great for that audience.
Yeah, well, I would like this to be as concrete and practical as possible for them. At a broad level, let me start abstract. I promise I'll get concrete. But here's my abstract answer. If you thought about the value to Berkeley, to Turkish companies or people in Turkey or anywhere, right? The values, this is an equation. So V is on the left-hand side. The value to Berkeley equals all that Berkeley has on offer, right? The students, the programs, the executive education, the intellectual property, all that stuff, and it's vast. Times is important. Navigability. How do you find it? It's an enormous set of opportunities, but that's the spirit of your question, right? So we are thinking hard about how we can increase the navigability of Berkeley for Turkish companies or companies from anywhere, so that the value to them of Berkeley, if we can move that navigability by 20%, we've moved the value of Berkeley to them by 20%. We could keep adding into the opportunities and set up new programs and stuff. Like, that's really expensive, especially in an era of AI. Our navigability technology is getting very, very interesting. So that's very broad brush, but that's a different way of thinking. Okay, so now more concretely. Our tech transfer office is called IPIRA, and the Intellectual Property and Industry Research Alliances. So there's a fellow who runs Industry Research Alliances in our tech transfer offices. His name is Eric Geigerich. He would be a really good concierge sort of person to call. That's a first call that I would make. Depending upon the company and what they're interested in, it's getting much easier to find out, here's a research lab that I can plug into directly. So I'll use artificial intelligence as an example. We have something called the Berkeley Artificial Intelligence Research Lab, BAIR lab, okay? And so the BAIR lab has a bunch of industry affiliates. If you go to the BAIR lab, Berkeley BAIR lab, their website, they have an industry affiliates page. and you will see all these big companies that are plugged in. So this is kind of a subscription model, but they get to see inside, the black box of what's going on at the research frontier around AI. So that's just one example. Here's another one that I think is helpful. If there's a single website, if somebody said, how about a website? You told me about a person who runs industry research alliances. You told me about a center. Here's a website called Begin. Like, how do I begin? So it's the mnemonic. How do I begin this process? If you just go to begin, begin, begin.berkeley.edu, that website is a compendium of everything going on at Berkeley, but it's searchable and it's curatable. It's if you said, well, it's just a list of 1,000 websites. That's not what it is. It's really something where I can find out what is going to be most useful to me. So I'm this kind of person. I'm a company in Turkey, wherever, and I can find stuff at Berkeley in a more curated way. So that Begin website is one way to think about our investment in navigability.
Maxitek'in sunduğu Vadi Buluşmaları devam edecek.
I think that's helpful in that regard. I'm like this corporate affiliate program, industry affiliate program, and there are a lot of ways. And in that regard, actually, I see Berkeley as a gateway to the broader Silicon Valley ecosystem as well, in terms of VCs, in terms of mentors, so a lot of ecosystem. So regarding that, I mean, there's also something I'm working on currently, which you've also started, this Berkeley affiliate VC funds.
Yes.
That's also help with the startups and research going on here. So I believe there is also a great value proposition here. For the corporates, they can become LPs to some of that funds. Let's say Berkeley Innovation Fund, and they can look for research, and maybe they can have earlier access, and they can communicate with other VCs along the Silicon Valley. So what's your vision about all of this research getting VC investment and corporate attraction? So how do you see the future along that?
Yeah, well, that's evolving very, very fast. And, it is an ecosystem because it's a system, right? Because there are lots of interdependencies. And I would stress they're not just interdependencies, they're interoperabilities. You have to design this in. So if somebody said, this is venture capital, it's coming from the outside, it's going to distort what we're doing. And it's sort of like, what if you flip that script? What if you say great research universities need to fund their fundamental research enterprise in order to remain great? How does Berkeley participate more in the economic value that it creates by connecting to venture capital in ways that don't distort what we do, but help us participate in the value? So to get super concrete, you mentioned these so-called shared carry partner VC funds. These are outside VC funds. They're not they're not Berkeley. But they're investing in Berkeley companies, and we have an affiliation agreement with them. There are 7 of them currently, and part of that affiliation agreement is such that they get certain advantages. They get a first look at some of the companies that are coming out. I can talk about what they get later. But part of what we get is, you mentioned LP or limited partner. The general partner, the GP, has contractually committed, not I'll make a gift, I promise, have contractually committed half of their return, in the jargon, half of their carry, back to the university. So in a model where the GP is getting 20% of the upside, half of that, or 10% of the upside on that whole portfolio, is coming back to Berkeley. $50 gets paid out to that general partner, 50 cents of it comes to us. That creates a feedback loop, a flywheel, right? Where all of a sudden now it's like, wow, we just changed Berkeley's economic model.
Yeah.
Now, people could look at that and say, but you're distorting other things. It's sort of like perfectly reasonable question, but let me show you why we are being very careful that we're not distorting the academic things that are very important. And if we can get that flywheel rolling, it's like, I have a spreadsheet. Here, I'll just give you an example. I have a spreadsheet with 15 different rows in it. Each row is a different channel through which Berkeley as a university, this is not the pension and endowment portfolio. This is a different channel through which Berkeley is getting equity participation in startups that are coming out of Berkeley. Okay? And I could talk about what I just gave you was one of the examples, shared carry funds. That's a row in this, but there are 15 rows. And it's in a spreadsheet so we can do the analysis. How much money are we talking about? With what likelihood? Low, medium, high scenarios, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's like, this is not small potatoes. It's very significant.
Yeah. What I'm curious about is how you view about the future of higher education in that regard. So which will be a blueprint. I know it's a long answer, but I mean...
Yeah, it's a big question, and it would take some time. But I look, I'm extremely optimistic about this. Call me biased, but I feel like this is how higher education can have more impact on society, right? In this country, but in a lot of countries, trust and confidence in higher ed institutions is like we need to restore that trust and confidence. The idea we're creating jobs, we're creating companies, we're creating livelihoods, we are creating therapeutics that are saving people's lives. This is all part of a very positive story.
Okay, so again, I mean, it's going back to the conversation like creating societal impact.
Yes, well, I think, but going back to the mission is a good place to go back to.
Yes, definitely. Okay, and one final question actually is about your maybe final piece of advice and recommendation for the organizations all over the world who would like to apply the playbook of Berkeley to become a startup campus. I mean, what I would say is like maybe doing more of the exploration, not instead of focusing on the execution. So that would be one of my take, but I'm curious about your opinion on that.
Well, it's a lovely question. So read the book, maybe would be one part of the answer, simply because we tried to write the book as a playbook. It's sort of like, here, if you read this, it's like we could do that or that wouldn't work here or whatever, right? But it's definitely written in that way. But I think if I answered it in one sentence, it would be think like an entrepreneur. I mean, think like an entrepreneur, right? It's like a big part of how Berkeley made so much progress so fast is because we had philanthropic capital to help us do it. So it's like paint a picture of how exciting it will be. And I know different countries have very different philanthropic, capital opportunities. But in this country, that was really catalytic. But ultimately, you're going to need to fund some of these things, right? And in this country, philanthropy is very helpful for that. But that's the way an entrepreneur thinks, right? An entrepreneur doesn't have the resources that they need. The second thing that people would say, because entrepreneurs are great at getting stuff done based on resources they don't control, right? That's a classic definition. So there's capital, but there's also people. It's sort of like are people really? I hope you can tell I'm kind of excited about this.
Yes,
okay?
definitely.
And part of but part of that is like, is there conviction? Are we serious about it? Right? Anybody can pay lip service to innovation and entrepreneurship. Everybody talks about it. It's sort of like, no, are you really convicted? Like in that yes if exercise, are you going to say no? We got to get through those if conditions. We got to get to yes here. And so I think that's a leadership choice, right? But you have to have the right leaders. And then the last one we've talked about is culture, right? So you're going to need the resources, you're going to need the leadership, and you're going to need a set of shared values where people start to say, yeah, this is the right thing, it's valuable, let's do this, we can do this.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Lyons. I mean, it was a great pleasure and honor. And I would like to add one more point to that. Actually, I think great leadership.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate you saying that. It's the thrill of my life doing this right now at this moment. So when things come together and those interdependencies aren't just interdependencies, but interoperabilities, genuinely, it gets very exciting.
Thank you so much. So, I mean, it was a great conversation with you. It was a great pleasure. I'm sure that companies in Turkey, other institutions will benefit a lot from it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So much.
I appreciate it.
Bu hafta Vadi Buluşmaları'nda dünyanın bir numaralı devlet üniversitesi, Kaliforniya Üniversitesi Berkeley'nin rektörü Rich Lyons'la beraberdik. Rich Lyons bize girişimcilik ve inovasyon ekosisteminin bir üniversite için neden önemli olduğunu, misyonun özünde topluma katkı sağlamak olduğunu ve diğer kurumların bundan nasıl faydalanabileceğini anlattı. Önümüzdeki hafta başka bir bölümde yine muhteşem bir konukla görüşmek üzere.
Maxitek, Vadi Buluşmaları'nı sundu.